Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod.
Never mind, Edgar Bronfman.
A bitter retreats, and the media merger soap opera love triangle comes to an end. Our Becky Quick broke the news. Paramount will be acquired by Skydance, run by the son of one of the world's richest people. Analyst Rich Greenfield joins us.
As much as it's been a difficult process for Skydance over the last, 9 to 12 months, the real reality is the hard part starts now.
And the first commercial spacewalk postponed. Former astronaut Mike Massimino on this new frontier.
Absolutely, 100%. We are safer than we used to be at this, but it's still space travel and is always at risk.
Plus, Zuckerberg weighs in on speech online and a typically elegant C-suite shuffle at Apple.
That Tim Cook does so well.
Yeah, you don't see this at Starbucks. You definitely don't see this at Disney.
It's Tuesday, August 27th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernan. Andrew is off today.
Management shakeup, though, at Apple. The company announced that CFO Luca Mastri will step down from the role on January 1st. He became Apple's CEO way back in 2014. CFO. Apple also set the date of September 9th for its next event, and the company is going to unveil the new iPhone. I think it's like the 16th one. It's going to have a lot of AI features. Maybe I have a problem.
He's not actually leaving the company, though, and I think that's
just leaving as CFO.
Just leaving that position. He'll still be at the company doing a lot of things there, and that should give a little bit of confidence to Apple shareholders, too. I think it would be a big deal if they said all of a sudden he was leaving completely.
Apple's back to like 3.3 trillion.
Steve Kovach is here with more on the details.
And by the way, we're seeing an interesting trend here with Apple execs leaving the leadership team. There was Phil Schiller, who was the head of marketing. He is now an Apple fellow looking over the App Store. And then Dan Riccio, he was in charge of hardware on the leadership team. He's now focusing on the Vision Pro. So it's really interesting, these execs, they leave, but they don't really leave.
And I was saying earlier, I think that should be comfort to Apple shareholders.
100%. And that's what the street's saying this morning, by the way.
It would be a different situation if he was walking out the door and leaving abruptly. That would cause concern,
exactly.
I think. But, if you can build this team of leadership and continue to keep people interested and maybe not burn them out at a pace, but keep them interested in things they're doing, I think that's good news for
Yeah, and Apple's been pretty good about succession on the top leadership team. Yeah. Johnny Ive was kind of a different one because he was kind of his own unique role. But I mean, compare that to what we're seeing.
Luca's pretty key.
Luca's very key. And I mean, he's there every earnings call. I meet with him every quarter. But also, Parekh, he's in the room too. Yeah. And so it's not like this is foreign to him. But you compare this to other succession plans.
This is something that Tim Cook does so well.
Yeah, you don't see this at Starbucks. You definitely don't see this at Disney. Yeah. Even another founder-led company like Amazon, they figured it out pretty well. But some other companies recently just not having it.
It's kind of shocking to see. That tells you how well they've done this move.
And the initial move, when this first broke last night, it was down like 0.8%, pared way back after people digested it. This is like a nothing thing. It's steady as she goes.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not old.
60, I think?
He is 60, but if you look at...
For me, that's old.
Yeah, to you, that's old. To me, it just means wise.
Yeah.
You actually might know something,
exactly.
Which doesn't usually come to about 45. How old are you?
39.
Oh, yeah. So any guesses on how much he's worth?
Which one, the new guy or
the old guy?
A lot.
No, I know.
Yeah, I don't think they disclosed it.
They didn't disclose it, but people figured it out.
What is it?
I don't know if it's exact.
Okay, what's the estimate?
What's your guess? 506.
506
wow,
million?
Oh, yeah.
That's not bad. That's more
than
I make.
For a CFO.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's great. Not a founder. So 60.
But I think that speaks to how key and important.
Yeah. That's I think they're looking at his holdings and adding it up and just trying to figure it out. I don't know if it's exactly, but I wondered.
He's probably holding on to Apple's shares for a very long time.
I'm sure he has a lot of RSUs over those 10 years. Yeah.
I don't know why I immediately think how much his money has he got. It's probably not good.
No, that's fine.
I'm not trying to keep score on someone based on money. I would do it based,
Okay. But the performance of the company.
Oh, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
If you're CFO and the stock's up 800%, what are you
And he's done
personally
record
worth?
stock buybacks for shareholders.
Yeah. Well, we'll put an end to
If
those.
you stay for a long
Your peeps
time
are going
and
to put
you
an
hold
end
on
to
to
those.
They are?
Oh, yeah. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg getting some things off his chest. In a letter to the House Judiciary Committee to the chairman, Representative Jim Jordan, it was responding to its investigation into content moderation, censorship, on internet platforms. And Zuckerberg wrote that the Biden administration, in his words, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our team when we didn't agree. Zuckerberg also said that the pressure from the administration was wrong, and he regrets he and the company were not more outspoken about it, and is ready to push back if something like that happens again. He also expressed regret that Meta, in his words, demoted a New York Post story about Hunter Biden, the president's son, ahead of the 2020 election, crucial time, saying in retrospect, it has since been made clear that the reporting was not and never was Russian disinformation. Representative Jordan called the letter a big win for free speech. The FBI itself, Zuckerberg said that he succumbed to pressure from the FBI to call that laptop information Russia disinformation. So the Biden, whether it was the Justice Department, or if I could have a lower opinion of the FBI, I don't think I could already, and that they would actually get involved in something like that right before the election, after current Secretary of State Antony Blinken rounded up 50, I mean, there were guys like Brennan and Clapper, so this wasn't a great list of people in the first place, but rounded up these people to say it's Russian disinformation. Then we had Leslie Stahl grilling Trump on it and saying, you know that this is, I mean, it was, the whole thing was such a exercise in the kind of what we're facing right now in this country in terms of mainstream media, pressure that it gets from an administration, and we all just sit back and act like it's normal, and it's really not. I mean, is this not staggering? And when if you lose Zuckerberg, who is totally probably sympathetic to the Biden administration in most ways, I can't read his mind, but I figure that.
Well, he's also sending this to Jim Jordan. I think he's bending over backwards to make sure that he is saying, here's what happened, and how and why.
And we still, Biden's gone now, so basically, even though he's still president, I think he's I don't know where he is.
He's lame duck.
Pizza.
Yeah.
Right, he's lame duck, but now we're not interested in what happened, what was going on with Hunter and all that, where this, supposedly $28 million changed hands with Biden Inc. And, now it's sort of in the past. So it effectively, whatever pressure was put on Meta, it worked. And we are, at this point, it's nothing's ever going to come of it. And the election was settled.
My guess is we'll hear more from Zuckerberg.
So who rigged the election? That's the,
Yeah.
Who didn't like the outcome or didn't want it happening?
Dirty tricks have been played all along. When you have the government involved in it, it's a different issue. Those are the issues that rise to the forefront.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Okay.
No, but seriously, dirty tricks from every campaign that's ever been out there. When you have government agencies that are involved in it, that's the difference. That's the...
Right.
Cheese will be next.
Still to come on Squawk Pod, Skydance's long journey to buying Paramount Global. Its rival bidder has dropped out. Media analyst Rich Greenfield says there's a lot still to look forward to with David Ellison at the helm of the storied studio.
A traditional media company with a lot of legacy assets, and you're juxtaposing that with a new CEO and owner, meaning real owner, who has $180 billion in his family fortune, who's 40 years old, and is a dreamer.
This is Squawk Pod.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernan. Andrew is off today.
Never mind, Edgar
Media
Bronfman.
executive Edgar Bronfman Jr. is dropping out of the bidding for Paramount. In a statement that was issued last night, he said, Our bidding group informed the special committee that we will be exiting the go shop process. It was a privilege to have the opportunity to participate. We continue to believe that Paramount Global is an extraordinary company with an unrivaled collection of marquee brands, assets, and people. While there may have been differences, we believe that everyone involved in the sale process is united in the belief that Paramount's best days are ahead. We congratulate the Skydance team and thank the special committee and the Redstone family for their engagement during the go shop process. Okay. Bronfman was leading an investor group's $6 billion bid for National Amusements. It's Paramount's controlling shareholder, which threatened to derail that $8.4 billion Paramount deal that Paramount deal had agreed to in July with the Skydance team. The Skydance transaction is now set to close in the first half of 2025. Now, some of the details behind this. Why did they back out? What happened? Part of it was timing. There was a very tight go-shop period and a tough time trying to get people together to be able to potentially raise the bid. I think a huge part of the problem was the publicity for high net worth individuals who were involved in this bid was challenging in the way that I understand it. They had to share lots of confidential information about their own personal net worth and assets. That information had to be shared with the special committee. It would then be shared with Centerview and with Skydance, and I think there was concern about potential leaks that would have come out of that, and I think that in itself was probably one of the biggest issues and maybe something that would prevent them from being able to raise their bid. The other issue is that there's a lack of a broader stockholder vote. That made it difficult. We knew that these were a lot of the issues heading into this, and it turned out that those issues all did come to the forefront. Made it pretty tough for this to be able to change and evolve from here.
It's just the machinations leading up to Bronfman's. When he came along, it's like, you got to be kidding me. Because it had been 6 or 7 different scenarios of Skydance and this and that.
You heard about Barry Diller being potentially interested in things.
And then he comes along and we go drop everything, talk about him, and it
was so far down the line with Skydance at that point. Right. There was the $400 million breakup fee that was involved.
He raised it. Who's involved? We speculated on who the investors were, and you spend all this time on it, and then we're back to
back to Skydance.
Okay, gives us something to do. It's a 3-hour show, I guess.
Well, and what's always interesting is behind the scenes and the machinations for this. It's a pretty marquee property, a lot of big names who are interested in it.
But
and obviously are. Yeah.
They're not that
Everybody's interested, but raising the money.
At this price, they're interested.
Right. And
a third of what it
the
used to
bigger
be
issue
worth.
is going up against Larry Ellison's money with some of these things, too. You have to be ready to raise a bid and continue to raise that bid. And I think that became the question, too. Joining us right now is Rich Greenfield. He's partner and co-founder of Lightshed Partners. And this has been a saga, Rich. What do you think of this latest move?
It's a bit anticlimactic, isn't it, Becky? I mean, we were just preparing for sort of the finale, the grand finale of this epic battle for Paramount, and Edgar just walked away, and that's it. So it's game over. The reality is as much as it's been a difficult process for Skydance over the last, 9 to 12 months, the real reality is the hard part starts now. Once they get approval, which will take probably 9 months, but I don't see any issue, then they actually own linear TV and movie studio and streaming assets, and they've got to figure out how to earn a compelling return on those assets.
And what's the way forward, do you think? Is it going to take a year, 2 years before you think we see whether this is working or not?
I think what's so interesting about Skydance as a bidder is, unlike every other, Becky, you've covered this space with me for a long time and looked across these companies. What's really interesting here is you're going to have a legacy media, so like a sort of a traditional media company with a lot of legacy assets, TV stations, TV networks, studios, and you're juxtaposing that with a new CEO and owner, meaning real owner, who has $180 billion in his family fortune, who's 40 years old and is a dreamer. Like, he has huge long-term ambitions. So I don't know if you actually see whether this is truly working in the first 12 or even 24 months. I mean, this is a decade-long plus plan. He wants to build something. He wants to build the media company of the future. He wants to build a streaming service that can rival Netflix. Look, he's got the capital and sort of longevity in terms of how he's looking at this business to do it. Execution's what's going to matter.
The stock's down almost 6% this morning. Obviously, a lack of a second bidder, meaning that the bidding process isn't going to continue to climb. What What about the idea of shareholder lawsuits? Because that's what everyone has said would come along the way no matter what happened, just because of the structure of the company. Somebody's going to be mad somewhere.
Look, the stock was trading in and around, low double digits for a while. Basically, that was all because you were getting half your stock at 15 in cash, and the rest was obviously being valued by investors in the, call it 7-ish range. So, now without having a second bidder, the stock's clearly going to decline. People are, this is not a Paramount Global. Look at where WBD is. Look at where Disney is. There is general concern for this entire sector that Skydance will have to prove over time that they can change the future trajectory of this company. Right now, investors are just lumping them all together. But Becky, specifically in your question of lawsuits, I actually think that's the one thing that Bronfman despite Bronfman sort of bowing out early, the fact that Bronfman put in a compelling offer that got to this, sort of extended go shop period, I think that's going to go a long way to mitigate the legal risk that, Redstone, National Amusements, and Paramount all face. There will always be lawsuits. That's what lawyers are for. But I think that really neutralizes those lawsuits, knowing that you had a competitive process.
Really quickly, last time you were here, you were teasing us about an investor that you saw on the list of Bronfman's investors in this that made you think his deal had more legs and potentially Sherry Redstone's approval. You wouldn't tell us who. I'm guessing we've since found out it was AOL former CEO John Miller, who, along with Sherry Redstone, is a partner at Advanced Capital, which is a small venture capital firm that invests in media and technology. Is that the answer?
Well, it's actually more than that, Becky. I think what's actually interesting, that's the one we were certainly referring to that you noted that came out later that week. But on top of that, Stephen Paul, we've since learned, is a very close, dear friend of Sherry Redstone. He's been trying to buy Paramount even on his own a while ago. That didn't materialize. But there were multiple very close relationships within that Bronfman-led consortium. It sounds like the money just wasn't honestly there to compete. Regardless of everything else, they just didn't have the money to actually compete with the Ellison bid. And that was sort of the part that we never understood, is like, when you're competing against one of the world's richest families, how do you ever win? The structure obviously didn't have Skydance, which some public market investors don't want Skydance folded in. But the reality is there just wasn't enough cash to fund a competitive offer. And so it's game over. Ellison wins. And now let's see what he can do with this asset.
Good to see you, Rich. Thanks.
Thanks for having me, Becky.
Next on Squawk Pod, we're launching into space travel with astronaut and Columbia professor Mike Massimino.
NASA and Boeing have a very good partnership for years. They've been the prime contractor on the space station for over 20 years.
Just why 2 astronauts are in space for months longer than expected, and how safety out there has evolved in just decades. Right after this. You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC. And this next interview, we're going to space. A helium leak has grounded the privately funded Polaris Dawn space mission, at least for a day. The mission, on board a SpaceX capsule, would send billionaire entrepreneur Jared Isaacman and 3 other private citizens into space, who aim to conduct the first spacewalk carried out by an all-civilian crew. On the flip side, some folks that did make liftoff, the 2 astronauts who haven't come home. Sunita Williams and Barry Wilmore have opted to stay on the International Space Station for 8 months instead of their scheduled 8 days. They will now return home in February 2025 on a SpaceX craft rather than on the Boeing Starliner that brought them there. Here's Joe.
Let's bring in Mike Massimino, former NASA astronaut, now a Columbia University engineering professor. He's author of the book Moonshot, a NASA astronaut's guide to achieving the impossible. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Does a day go by where you don't say how amazing it is that this has really quickly moved into the private sector?
I think about it pretty much all the time. About every day, something else is happening. It is amazing, actually. When you read about what they're going to be doing, it is amazing. They're doing things that the government hasn't done for a long time, putting astronauts in a very high altitude. They're going to conduct a spacewalk, the first privately conducted spacewalk. So it's a 5-day mission, jam-packed with a lot of exciting things.
Is the risk been minimized since some of the most scarring events in anyone who's lived a certain amount of time? We remember that where we were, what we were doing for a couple of those incidents, and for some reason I can't get beyond just worrying and having some anxiety when there's going to be a crew on board. Especially, I mean, Elon Musk is amazing, SpaceX is amazing, but doesn't this raise the stakes when there's a crew? Or are they so good at this already? They do a lot of these launches. Have they got it down?
Well, they've gotten pretty good at it, right? And it's been a while. The last major accident we've had was the Columbia accident back in 2003. So it's been a while since we've had a major accident. We've had some close calls. We've had some things happen on space flights, but we've been able to recover from them, and no one's been hurt.
Is it more
badly.
a simpler? Because remember there was weird Morton Thiokol O-rings on one, and then there were some tiles that came off on.
Challenger was these are shuttle accidents you're talking about. So
am.
The first one was an O-ring problem back in 1986.
I don't mean to pick on the shuttle or anything. I'm just talking about how complex that.
I remember where I was.
To answer your question, I agree with you. It's a dangerous business. We've learned a lot. I mean, the shuttle was a dangerous vehicle. I had 2 space flights on the shuttle. Looking back on it, it was a higher risk than I think NASA wanted at that time. Now the spaceships are much safer the way they're constructed.
They are, yeah.
They don't land. This one does not land on a runway. It has its thermal protection system covered during launch. There's abort systems that can keep you safer. There's a lot of automation that keeps you safer.
That's why I was asking.
So I think we're definitely, absolutely, 100%, we are safer than we used to be at this. But it's still space travel, and there's always that risk.
I just read that a fuel leak has postponed it a day.
Helium leak, a little bit different.
It was a helium leak in the one up at the ISS.
Yeah, a little bit different.
Right?
That was a helium leak in space, which was worse than having one on the ground. And this was ground equipment. Apparently, it's the umbilical that provides the helium on the ground. So it might be a simple change out because it's a ground device that's having the problem.
This is why you're here. So
there you go.
You can tell us exactly.
What's going to happen to the astronauts who are kind of abandoned up there? Were you shocked by the decision to not go with the Boeing flight home? Are you somebody?
No, I think it was the right call. I wouldn't say abandoned either because we're all thinking about them. And no, they're in good shape.
But they thought they were going for a few days.
They thought they were going to be up there for 8 days, and then it moved to a few weeks, and then they were sort of this keep moving the date until they could figure it out. And now they know what the plan is. So I'm not surprised that they decided to do this because they didn't feel comfortable with the failures they had. You mentioned the helium leak. There was some thruster issues. You have to be able to steer the spaceship. So they had those failures, and they did a lot of testing on the ground, but they did not have enough time. They have to bring that spaceship back. So they didn't have enough time to figure it all out, and so they changed the plan, and they'll be up there coming back on a different spacecraft in February.
What should that tell us about the Boeing proposition here? As a business channel, we look pretty close.
Well, I don't think it's over yet. NASA and Boeing, and on the space sector now, NASA and Boeing have a very good partnership for years. They've been the prime contractor on the space station for over 20 years. A lot of dedicated people there and a good relationship. So I think it's not over yet. I think that spacecraft will fly again. It's going to come back empty. There's not going to be anybody on board. I think they're going to continue to do the testing on the ground and try to correlate with what they saw in space, make some changes, and try to fly it again. I think they're too far along, both the investment by the government, but also the investment by Boeing. That a lot of their own money is inside of this thing. I'd be shocked if they abandon ship here. I think they're going to fly it again.
So you go up. Mm-hmm. You're going up for 8 days. Then they tell you it's 8 months.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? What's your? It's like, I think I guess do you have any choice? I guess I could come. I could come to grips that I'm just.
Maybe it's better once you know.
I'm going to hang out. I hope. Yeah. Do you have Wi-Fi? I mean.
Oh yeah, you can make phone calls. You have an internet protocol phone to call your family and your friends.
Once you get past the small amount of space that you have, then you just. No, you better stay inside and just wait till your time comes.
It's not as small as you might think, Joe. It's the volume inside of the spaceship that takes you to orbit and brings you back is small, but you're only in there for a few hours typically. Once you get to the space station, it's large. It's about the volume of a 747, which is quite large for a spaceship. So, and you can float, so you can use all of the volume.
The Wall Street Journal said it's about the size of 3 boxcars, the livable space.
3 boxcars doesn't sound very big. I don't know if they were talking. They might have been talking about the spacecraft that brings you there. The size of the space station.
Is it? The
size of the
You know
space station,
better, right?
all the modules inside of the space station is about the inside volume of a 747.
Becky,
That's still pretty
yesterday,
tight for like 13 people to be living in.
Right now they have 9. Typically you have 7 when you have exchanges of crew, either 4 or 3 coming up depending on the spaceship. You have a little more for a few days.
Yesterday, they insisted that, or they said, at this point, nobody's been put on calorie restrictions, and it looks like we have plenty of food. So I was like,
they're not going to miss any meals up there. They have about a 4.
Really?
4
They got
months.
plenty of food?
Oh yeah, they got about 4 months of reserve food and water, which is the main things you're worried about. And they have extra clothing and other supplies.
I wouldn't.
But they also have supply ships. What's that? You would get?
You can. I wear the same thing, but
Oh.
yeah, I need. Yeah,
Wear the same.
I do
You
here.
have to change. You
I
do.
do here. I do on set.
I wasn't going to say anything, but they do have supply ships too that bring up deliveries. So they just had one a few weeks ago, and they got another one coming up in September. So they get resupplied quite often.
Do you think it's out of an abundance of caution? I mean, they're going to send that thing back with no one on it because of the helium leak.
Yeah.
You think they'd probably be okay on that thing?
Well, it's not just a helium leak. It was more the thruster issue.
Right.
But I think it'll be okay. So it's interesting what you said about having another accident and how horrible that was, right?
Don't we
all
all
don't want that again.
In the back of our mind.
Yeah,
we
and
all-
those folks, when they had the folks in charge right now, like Ken Bowersox, for example, as an astronaut colleague of mine who was an astronaut before I was there when I was there as well. We all remember those things. It was 20 years ago. A lot of us were there. The folks who were making those decisions were there. They don't want that to happen again. So although the probability of that spacecraft coming back in good shape is okay, I think it's going to get back. It's very high probability that they'll get it back. When you think about putting a person inside, it changes the whole idea, especially when you have a good option. And in this case, they have a pretty good option. Yeah, we talked about the crew. Maybe they're disappointed they can't come back in the spaceship they were intended to come back in, but they're okay with staying on board for another 6 months, executing a completely new expedition. They're very experienced. So the operations of the station will continue. The crew will be able to be returned safely. That's probably number one, safety. Second is operations. This is a bit of an inconvenience. It's a disappointment. But I do think that spacecraft will fly again.
They're yelling at us to wrap. They have been for a
Yes.
while. But what's the
I can't
scariest
hear
thing?
anything.
No, what's the scariest thing in space? You're just so interesting. We got to hear more. What's to you the biggest risk factor?
There's a lot there. The main, you think about launch.
Everything.
You think about entry. The other thing that we don't always think about is spacewalks, which is what they're going to be doing when we talked about it as a crew. We'd say, all right, launch is dangerous, entry is dangerous. We've got to. When are we going to really pay attention? Of course, we're always going to pay attention, but spacewalks are really could be very dangerous. We haven't had anyone hurt during a spacewalk. We've come close, but we've been able to respond to it. So it's interesting with this private spacewalk going on to see what they're going to be doing.
And space junk too, right? The stuff that's
That's
out there.
part of it too. And
Scary.
with this private mission, they're going to be going up in a high orbit. My flights to Hubble were a higher orbit too, not as high as where they're going. So it's more radiation and it's also more debris at the higher orbit. So. Yeah, but I think they're going to be okay. I think they've taken the right
We've all
precautions.
seen too many movies.
Yeah.
Because I hear, I think Spacewalk and I'm 2001. He's still going.
Yeah, I know we learned our lessons from those.
And then I think in the George Clooney one, the space debris is what got him, right?
That's make-believe, Joe. That didn't really
I know,
yeah.
they're movies, but
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen too many, and then Alien. I mean, hopefully you
Oh,
don't
no,
run
now I'm
into
gonna have nightmares.
anything like that.
Yeah, no,
Mike,
yeah. That you don't want to think
Have
about it.
ever
You don't want to think about that.
You never told anyone I was an astronaut, and they go, please. Because it's very, rare to me.
And impressive
to me,
and amazing.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
You remember in terms of, Jack Nicholson in terms of endearment, the women were all over him. I mean, because he was an astronaut. Does that happen?
I never experienced that part of the job.
Well, Joe's all over.
Yeah, I'm
it.
all over you.
That's never happened.
I'm a fanboy, so you don't need
Thank you.
anything.
Thanks for having me.
That's the pod for today. Thanks for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern to get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears. Please follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. That's it. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.